My name's Laurel Duquette, and my husband Derek Owens and I own a cottage at Long Beach in Wainfleet, and we really do love it. You know, in the last couple of years, we've been living mainly off our small pensions. So for 2 years now, we've rented our cottage for 2 weeks to families, 1 week each, to help pay the taxes. And this spring, I was doing the same. Until I found out in May that rentals were outlawed by the township. So I closed my Airbnb ad. And you know, I really wasn't aware of the new bylaw. I hadn't paid any attention. We didn't have a rental, so it didn't really apply to me. I didn't know much about it. Anyway, apparently you can rent for 30 days. So one day in June, I looked into changing the settings on the Airbnb site to advertise for a 30-day rental. I got an Airbnb agent to help me because I do find the site pretty difficult to use. I don't use it often. Anyway, after an hour or two, we ended up deciding that it was difficult to use, and therefore I chose, at least for the short run, to close the site. So the site was closed on that day. Well, I guess a bylaw officer must have found the site online. You couldn't book any reservations. The bookings were blocked, but I guess it was visible. And in fact, when he looked for it later, he reported that he couldn't find it, which was not surprising since the site has been closed since mid-May. A few days later, I was pretty surprised when I received a fine for $10,000 for advertising on Airbnb. Now, by the way, remember, I have not rented this year at all. I've had no rentals from Airbnb. But anyway, I did get a fine for advertising for $10,000. So that's when I started to get educated, and I found out how much the township was harassing property owners in a similar situation to mine. And what struck me was that these were mostly young families. They weren't old people like me. They were young families who had bought cottages in good faith and were just looking to rent a few weeks to help out with expenses. The more I looked into it, I just couldn't believe what was going on. My neighbors told me that the bylaw officer had come around to them asking if I was renting my place. They all said no, and taking pictures of my house and my car. And I wasn't alone. I spoke to so many of these young people, and many of them had actually bought licenses and were still being harassed. It really was truly a reign of terror. And what really impressed me most, and made me most sad, really, is how mean-spirited the township has been. I've watched hours of videos of past council meetings trying to get a sense of where this bylaw came from, and I really was shocked by the behavior of the 4 councillors. Well, actually 3, because the 4th one said virtually nothing.
The whole thing is not good for a large portion of people, because when you have to write all these rules to go after 5%, 95% get caught in the crossfire. Life has always been that way. This is no exception.
5 to 10% that are crazies that we have to control. And the only way to control it is you have to control everybody. So unfortunately, you get caught in a trap because of the bad operators.
I was shocked at how mean-spirited, bullying, and really, frankly, ridiculous these councillors were, trumping up make-believe threats. The nightmare, the bad apples, the crazies, the bad people. And, you know, even the Uber drivers took a beating.
Better to be heavy-handed at first, and then we can back off afterwards, than to have this thing blow up in our face and nothing works. Because to be Ubers running all over town delivering coffee and donuts every morning.
In a single meeting, the fines were raised tenfold, from $500 to $5,000, from $2,000 to $20,000 in a space of 45 minutes. And why? If you listen to the councillors, they said things like, to make a point, to make it hurt, to be punitive and severe.
They all have to have teeth that are going to hurt. And you have to have teeth, and then the guy can just, he knows he's going to pay the fine. So he's going to get it out of the guy that's doing it. So there's consequences. That's the only way anybody stops doing anything is they know it's going to cost them money.
The punitive nature of fines and being completely aware of the sort of broader framework that we're working in. But if that's direction the council wants to give us, we're prepared to do so, or we're also prepared to take explicit direction.
And so I've joined the Short-Term Rental Association and its lawsuit against the STR bylaw because it was made in bad faith, it's been administered terribly, and it's illegal. More broadly, this is about the AMPS system, the AMP system of fines, and that is administrative monetary penalties, under which this bylaw and most others are administered. And I think it's a threat to all citizens in Ontario. It's a system ripe for exploitation, and that is what the township is doing. For instance, Waynfleet and other townships around the province have started to fine each property owner on title separately for a single fine. So imagine you have a party, your neighbor doesn't like your party, calls in the bylaw officer who fines you $5,000. But because you have a spouse with whom you own your house, your fine becomes $10,000 between the two separate fines levied on both of you. This is double dipping, and it's illegal. And if it isn't stopped, it's going to become the low-hanging fruit of township money grabs for all kinds of bylaw infractions all across the province. Thanks.